All right. For data analysis, okay, what you need to do first is, of course, to collect data from the survey that you have. Okay, and then from that, we will be looking at the statement of the problem. Okay, because basically the goal of your data analysis is to be able to answer your statement of the problem. No, so let's say for example, I have here my statement of the problem. Okay, and for each statement of the problem, if you can remember, I asked you in chapter 3 to have or present your statistical treatment. No, so the first statement of the problem here is the demographic profile of the respondents, okay, in terms of three factors here in this particular data collected. They have the age, the gender, sex, basically, and the grade level. No, so for that, you have to have, again, for each of the research questions, you have to have your statistical treatment. No, so for the first uh, statement of the problem, they will be using count and percentage. For the second research question here, the mean academic anxiety of the respondents, they'll be using mean. And lastly, for the third statement of the problem or the third research question, is there a significant difference on the academic anxiety of the respondents for demographics? They'll be using t-test and ANOVA. So these statistical treatments should be presented in the third chapter. Okay? So this is now the summary of the collected data. So this is now the age. Okay? They have their 15 to 17 years old, um, 18 to 20 years old, 21 to 22 years old, and so on. Okay? For the gender, they have female and male. And of course, for the grade level, they have grade 11 and grade 12. Okay, what they are measuring here is the academic anxiety of senior high school students, no? And they would want to know if there is a difference in the academic anxiety of the students as per their demographics, age, gender, and grade level. So these are the questions or the statements in their instruments. And as you can see, every question corresponds to an answer. Okay? So horizontally, this is the response of each respondent, okay, and so on and so forth. As for the demographic profiles, usually what I do in data analysis is I code them. If you can remember again in chapter 3, we have this thing called data coding. No, kasi sabi ko nga sa inyo before, some softwares, some statistical softwares do not accept words or letters in for their data analysis. So that's why we have to do data coding. So I coded age, 15 to 17 years old as 1, 18 to 20 as 2, 21 to 22 as 3, and so on. No? For gender now, I coded female as 1 and male as 2. And for grade level, I coded uh, grade 11 as 1 and grade 12 as 2. Now, let's say for example, I have 270 respondents. Should I be writing the code for each of these respondents? What do you think? Should I be coding for each respondent? Like for the 217, maglalagay ko 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 3, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 1, 1, and so on. What do you think? Should I do that? Yes, no, maybe. Basically, you have to. No, kasi if you will not do that, then how are you going to code it? But of course, you will lessen the burden if you know how to use commands in Excel. Okay? If you can see here in the formula, I will be highlighting that. Okay? In the formula bar, I used commands, Excel commands, to do the coding. Can you see? Can you see the commands that I highlighted earlier? Yes. So if you know how to use Excel commands, then you can use that command to make your life easier. Okay? So same is true for the female. Yan. For the gender, I mean. Okay, very easy, especially if you only have two categories, no, for your demographics. Usually, I use the if command. Yan. So if, blah, 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 and so on. So let's say, for example, I will be deleting this. Now, what you need to do is just to write your command or your formula in your Excel cell, and you just have to drag it. And as you can see, Excel will do the work for you. Okay? Same is true with the demographic grade level. Okay? So let's try to answer first the first research question, the demographic profile. Sabi natin kanina, they will be using count and percentage. So in Excel, actually, you can use the command count, and you can also use the percentage formula to answer your first um, research question. So nandito yan. Yan. So as you can see here, there is a um, count and percentage summary here. So we have 210 respondents that are 15 to 17 years old, 57 respondents that are 18 to 20, and 3 respondents that are age 21 to 22. For the gender, we have 112 males and 158 females. And for the grade level, we have 89 grade 11 and 181 um, grade 12. No? Of course, we have to use the percentage. Very easy lang naman yan. So, male divided by the total. And you just have to click on the percentage here. Then express it as percentage into decimal places. That's very easy. Convert again to percentage. And you just have to get the sum of that, which should be 100%. Okay? And of course, to present, no, in your chapter 4, the demographics, we use graphs, no, or charts to present, okay, your demographics. No, we use bar charts if it's just count. We use pie chart if we're looking at a data that is part of a whole, and so on. Okay, so here I just used bar graphs for the demographics, gender, grade level, and age. Okay, so you just have to report this one. No, very descriptive. You just have to report them. Okay, for you to be able to do that in Excel, you will just use count if. Okay, so look at the range. Okay, so count if, then that's the range, and then your criteria. So of course your criteria is 15, let's say, years old to 17 years old. Okay, so ang criteria pala natin ay, kasi kinode na natin, so 1 ang ating criteria dyan. So as you can see, there are 210 um, respondents who are 15 to 17 years old. Are you following? Okay. So you just have to do them again. So again, count if here equals count if, then determine the range. So again, sorry, nakamute pala ako. Yeah, so we'll just using the count, no, to determine the counting, okay, for your demographic age. Have you followed that particular command? I will not be discussing all of the commands in Excel, ha. I think I will just leave it to you to find out, no, how to use or how to use those commands. So basically, we're done with the first uh, research question. We've already answered the first research question. So the next thing that we need to do is to answer the second research question, which is the mean academic anxiety. Okay, so here we will be using mean as our statistical treatment. So we will go to the responses of your respondents in the survey instrument that you have. Okay, so this one, we will be getting, as you can see, average. Okay, average of the responses of the respondents. Okay, and then also we will be getting the average of the responses per item. Okay, so per respondent and per item. So this is yung nasa ilalim, that's the per item. Tapos yung nandoon naman horizontally, that is per respondent. Okay? And what you will be reporting is this one. Okay? This is called your grand mean or the mean of all the responses. Okay? So again, you will just be using the average command for that. Okay? So now, how do you generate this interpretation? Aside from your grand mean, you have to be able to interpret as well. Ano ibig sabihin ng 1.64, 2.73, 2.82, and so on. You have to have your range of scores or range of answers here. Okay? So you have your 1 to 1.6, that's very low academic anxiety. 1.61 to 2.2, that's low. 2.21 to 2.80, that's moderate. 2.81 to 3.40, that is high. And 3.41 to 4, that is very high academic anxiety. I think this was taught in statistics when you discuss the frequency distribution table. Yes? Just in case you don't know, this is just like to know this one or to determine this one, this is just simply the range of the score. So 1 to 4 yung sinasagot nila. So 4 ang range minus 1 divided by kung ilan yung choices mo dito. So divided by 5. So that will be equals 3 over 5. So your range is 0.6. That's why you started with 1 to 1.6. Are you following, people? 1 to 1.6. Then, of course, you will not start with 1.6 on the next level. Kasi yung 1.6 ay nandoon na sa range nung una mo. So you will start with 1.61, 2.2, and so on and so forth. So basically, we're just adding 0.6 on every end of the range. Okay? So saan nakukuha to? Saan nakukuha tong range? Very low to very high. Usually, you can get this on your related literatures. Okay? So ito na yan. They have found out that the mean academic anxiety is 2.2523, okay, with the interpretation moderate anxiety. So you have to report that using a table that looks something like this, okay? So you have your construct, which is your academic anxiety, okay? The number of respondents is 270 students or 270 respondents. The mean is 2.5253. The standard deviation is 0.5731. And the interpretation is moderate academic anxiety. So again, you have to process this, then comprehensively explain, and then you have to connect this to your literature. Or other literatures telling that students in the senior high school have moderate academic anxiety. Yung iba bang mga literature sinasabi it's high, it's low, and so on. No? So you have to compare it with your literatures. Question, kung may scoring na po yung instrument namin, pwede po bang gamitin yon para sa table? Yes, if there is, if your instrument has its own scoring, then use that score. No, you don't have to create your own. Kagaya ng PSQI, I think. The Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index has its own scoring, and each of the score has its own interpretation. Meron ba yon sa inyo? May sarili na rin siyang interpretation. If like, for example, they got this particular point, then that equates to this particular interpretation. Yes. No? So PSQI has that. Okay? Yeah. So for PSQI, for example, 14 to something, ganito ang ibig sabihin nun, and so on. You can use that. Okay? All right. So any question with regards to answering the second research question here? Usually in your research question, the pangalawang question talaga is all about the variable that is involved in the study. So ito talaga yon. Question? None? Okay. And lastly, now, we have to answer the third research question. Is there a significant difference on the academic anxiety of the respondents per demographics? So they will be using t-test and ANOVA here. Okay, so t-test for demographics that has two groups like grade level, okay, and ANOVA for demographics that have three groups, no, which is your age. So tatlo yung grupo natin sa age, so ANOVA ang gagamitin natin dyan. Okay. To be able to answer the third research question, we will be using a statistical software called Minitab. No? So first, the thing that we need to do is to determine the average academic anxiety per respondent. So we will be copying this and we will be pasting this in the Minitab software. Let me just share my entire screen. Please press 1 if you can see my screen now. Okay. So this is now your Minitab software. Okay. So I already copied the mean academic anxiety per respondent, and I just have to paste it here. And I will be labeling it as academic anxiety. Okay. And then I will be putting in as well age, gender, and grade level here. Okay, Minitab software actually accepts letters and words. So, but for age, I will just be putting in the coded. Uh, I will just be putting in the coded data. Okay, that's for age. For gender, I will be putting in the categorical response. So yung una kanina, coded response yung nilagay natin. For gender, I will be putting in the categorical response. If you can see there in C3, nagkaroon siya ng code na T, no? Meaning categorical siya. Okay? That will be the same with grade level. I will be getting the categorical response as well. And then I will perform t-test and ANOVA on both. Okay. Now, before I proceed with my t-test and my ANOVA, I would want to know first if there are outliers, no, in my data, no, in the data that I have collected. Meron kayang outliers dyan, no? So what I will do is I will perform an outlier test first. So I will be clicking on stat and basic statistics. You have here at the bottom normality test and outlier test, no? You can actually use any of this to determine the normality of the data that you have collected. No? Usually, I use the outlier test. They'll be here in Minitab software. They use the Dixon and the Grubbs outlier test. No? So I will be checking the outliers in my um, construct academic anxiety. I will be using the Grubbs outlier test at 0.05 significance level. Okay, and my assumption is the smallest or the largest data is an outlier. Okay, so the graph that they will be providing here is the outlier plot. Okay, the results they will be putting in the method, the test, and the outlier. And I'll be just clicking in OK, and then Minitab software will do the work for you. Okay, so this is now the outlier plot. Usually, I do not present the outlier plot in my analysis, but what I do is I present or I generate a histogram with fit, okay, to show the normality of the data that I have there. As you can see, it's not skewed to the left and it's not skewed to the right. So basically, in our assumption, this is a normally distributed. Okay, so as you can see here, what you need to do in the Grubbs outlier test, as you can see, the null hypothesis that we have here, sabi niyan, all data comes from the same normal population, and the alternative hypothesis here is that the smallest or the largest data value is an outlier. Okay, so our significance level is 0.05. We have performed the Grubbs outlier test. Our construct is academic anxiety. Can you see it from your end? It's small, right? But you can see it, I hope. Rin kasi siya malalakihan. Alright. Anyway, so N is 270. The mean is 2.5253. It is the same with what we have solved for here. 2.2523. There. It's 2.25253. And our standard deviation is 0.5731. The minimum is 1 and the maximum is 4. The Grubbs outlier test value is 6 and our p-value is 1.000. Okay? So because our our p-value is 1, then we will not reject no, our null hypothesis. Ibig sabihin, totoo, ng data natin comes from the same normal population. And as you can see here, there is a note. Can you type in the note here in the Grubbs outlier test? Yan yung actually, that is the actual result. Can you type it in? Let me just join from my other device so that I could see your responses. What was the note there? No outlier at the 5% level of significance. That's correct. So meaning, if there are no outlier at the 5% level of significance, then that means that our data is normal and we can proceed with our data analysis. Now the question is, what are we going to do if there are outliers? What are we going to do if there are outliers? Basically, if it falls under the 5% level of significance, we can still tolerate them. Okay? For example, we have 270 respondents. And what's 5% of 270? Around 14? Yeah, 13.5, no? So we can tolerate 14 outliers if we have 270 respondents, no? And we have the 5% um, level of significance. But if not, we have to do data cleaning. Yes, that's correct. All right. So because we do not have outliers at the 5% level of significance, then we will now proceed with our analysis. So we will use t-test to determine the difference of anxiety levels in the demographics, gender, and grade levels. I'm going to be clicking stat and basic stats again. Okay. I will use two sample t-test. I will not be using paired t-test. Okay, I will be using two sample t-test. Because for paired t-test, it should be the group should be dependent. But for two sample t-tests, we are using that for two independent groups. Okay, so our samples here is academic anxiety. Okay, as you can see, when we're using the two sample t-test, here you can see a drag down here. Okay, you must be clicking both samples are in one column. Okay, then your samples is academic anxiety, and your sample ID is either gender or grade level. Let's start with gender first. Our options here, our confidence level is 95. We will not be writing a hypothesized difference, and we will assume equal variances. Okay, our graphs, usually hindi na ako naglalagay ng graph. Okay, then I will just be clicking OK. And you have here now your result for the two sample T for academic anxieties. As you can see here, the gender for female is 158. The mean is 2.623. The standard deviation is 0.524. Then the standard error for the mean is 4.2%. The male is 112 with a mean of 2.388. Standard deviation of 0.613. And a standard error for mean 0.058. Now, what you want to know or what you want to look out here is this one, the t-test of difference. Okay? Because this is where we will be deciding whether we will be rejecting or not rejecting our null hypothesis. Okay? So basically, ang hypothesis nila dito, class, is, I've written it here somewhere. Ang null hypothesis nila, yan. There is no significant difference on the academic anxiety between male and female students. Okay? So dahil marami silang demographics, basically they have three hypothesis. No significant difference sa gender na demographic, no significant difference on the grade level demographics, and no significant difference on the age level demographics. Okay? All right. So we have to look at our t-test of difference. We have the t-value here, 3.38, and the p-value of 0.001, and a degree of freedom of 268. Let's look at this now. Okay, the t-value is t-value is 3.38, and the p-value is 0.001. So as you can see, your p-value is less than your alpha value. So what will be our decision now? Do we reject or do we not reject the null hypothesis? When the p-value is less than the alpha value, I think that was taught in statistics. What would be our decision here? Do we reject or do we not reject the null hypothesis? Basically, we will reject the null hypothesis. If the p-value is less than the alpha, then we reject. Okay? If you can remember here, the null hypothesis, sinasabi nila, walang kaibahan ang academic anxiety ng male and female. No? But because the probability of that is very low, 0.001, and it's less than our alpha value, then we reject that claim. No? So ano sinasabi natin ngayon dito? From the data that we have collected, we can actually say there is enough evidence. Okay? Ang sinasabi dyan, no? Ang explanation dito, there is enough evidence. There is enough evidence to conclude that there is a difference between there is a difference, there is an academic anxiety difference. Academic anxiety difference between male and female students. Are you following, people? Magkaiba yung academic anxiety nila. Okay? So, pwede natin sabihin, sino mas mataas na academic anxiety? Now, if we would try to look at our data, we can actually conclude it here. Who has a higher academic anxiety? Of course, the one with the higher mean. Right? Sabi natin dito kanina sa ating interpretation. Yan. Pag mas mataas, mas high yung academic anxiety. Kasi yung one, very low academic anxiety. From our data here, who has the higher academic anxiety? That is the female students. Naiintindihan po ba ako? So let's proceed now. So the same thing will be done with the difference between the academic anxiety on the grade levels. Again, I will use two sample T. So I will just remove my sample IDs. So I will just replace that with grade level, and then I'm going to be clicking OK. Here, again, my t-value is negative 1.61, and my p-value is 0.108. I'm going to be writing it here again. Negative 1.61. Tapos ang p-value natin is 0.108. Okay, as you can see now, what can we conclude about the p-value? Is it smaller or bigger than our alpha value? So p-value is larger, no? P-value is larger than your alpha value. So what's our decision here? Do we reject or do we not reject? We will not reject. Wala pong accept ha. Do not reject the null hypothesis. So anong implication nito? Sabihin natin dyan, from the data that you have collected, there is no enough evidence. There is no enough evidence to say or to tell that there is academic anxiety difference between grade 11 and grade 12 students. Okay? That is the implication of what we have found out. Okay, so ibig sabihin, kung walang difference, ano ibig sabihin nun? There is no difference, then what does it mean? Then that means that the academic anxiety of both the grade levels are the same. Okay? So when you are presenting this in your chapter 4, no, you have to elaborate. No, hindi lang ito ang ilalagay ninyo sa chapter 4. You have to elaborate it, you have to explain, no? Also you have to explain your table. Okay? And then connect this with your literatures. Nakasunod po. Okay. And then lastly, we will use ANOVA for the significant difference to determine the significant difference of the academics anxiety among the age groups. Okay, so here you have here ANOVA, and we will be using one-way ANOVA here. Okay, so response, meron ulit dito dinadrag. Response data are in one column for all factor levels. I'm gonna be clicking in academic anxiety, and my factor would be age. Okay, our options, we will assume equal variances. The confidence interval is two-sided, and then the confidence level is 95. The comparisons that we have, you can actually click in the two keys test. No? This is actually a post hoc test. Pero usually kasi yung mga ganito, ginagamit lang kapag ang data mo ay ordinal. Okay? So because ang ating Likert scale ay considered as ordinal, I will be clicking in the two keys test. Pwede rin namang Fishers or Dunnett's. no? But the usual that they use is 2 keys. So we will be using 2 keys again, no? Basically, yung mga post hoc test, ginagamit ito para ma-determine kung yung calculation mo ng ANOVA ay tama. Okay? So kapag umayon yung 2 keys test with your ANOVA, then that means your ANOVA is actually correct. Okay? The graphs, no, interval plot lang, sige. And so on. So I'll be clicking in OK. And here are your interval plot. Then the 2 keys test here. Okay? So as you can see, pag nagkaroon ng magkakaibang grouping sa 2 keys test, mas madali talaga malaman kapag gumagamit tayo ng post hoc test, no? Pag nagkaroon ng magkakaibang groupings, nakikita nyo yan, yung letter A, letter B. Yan. Pag nagkaroon ng magkakaibang groupings, ibig sabihin may difference. Okay? And let's try to look at our ANOVA computation here. Yan. So here is your analysis of variance. You have your source, degree of freedom, adjusted SS, adjusted MS, the F value, and the P value. So usually, ang pinapresent lang dito, class, is the F value and the P value. Okay? So you have your F value is 6.002 and your P value is 0.003. Let's go back to our presentation here. And yan. So as you can see here, of course, I will be writing in the age categories, the number, okay, the number of respondents per age category, the mean per age category, the standard deviation, the p-value, and the f-value. So let's look at our p-value again. What can we say about our p-value here? The p-value is less than your alpha value. So we will reject, again, the null hypothesis. Again, anong implication nito? Implication nito is that, again, there is enough evidence, no, to conclude that there is an academic anxiety difference between the age groups, no, between age, okay, or among the age groups in this particular category. Okay? Sige, next. Paano naman, sir, kung correlation kami? Yan. Sino mga correlations dito? May I see? Which group? Puro difference po yung pinakita ninyo, sir. Ano, so maraming correlation. Sige, let's try. For correlations now, we can actually use correlation for nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio data. So let's remember, if nominal, we will be using chi-squared, no? Test of chi-squared tests, test of association for nominal, and then we will be using the Spearman's rank for ordinal, and we will be using Pearson's R for interval and ratio data. Okay? So, meron naman tayo dito ng mga numero. So, for example, academic anxiety tsaka age. Yan. Let's try to see kung related ba ang academic anxiety sa age. So, again, I'll be clicking on basic statistics, stat, and then basic statistics. Then I will be clicking in correlation. Correlation is there. So academic anxiety and age. So here in the method, they have two, the Pearson correlation and the Spearman's law. Okay. So Pearson correlation, then we will be displaying the p-values. Okay, I'll be pressing in OK. As you can see, Pearson correlation 0.063 and the p-value is 0.3. Okay? So ibig sabihin hindi related. Okay? Kasi yung p-value mo um, mas malaki sa alpha value. And for correlation, you have to generate a scatter plot. So you have to click in graph, scatter plot, and then with regression here, click in with regression. Okay, then press OK. And of course, your academic anxiety, your X variable is your independent. So ang independent natin dito is age. Ang dependent natin is academic anxiety. Okay? By default, pwede na tayong mag-click actually na OK. So as you can see, it's very scattered. Okay? So kasi hindi naman talaga yan interval data. Okay? That is just a nominal data na kinode natin. Kaya siya naging uh, interval. But that is the process, no, of determining the correlation of your interval or your ratio data. Okay? Question. Okay, maglagay ako ng isa dito. Kunin ko naman yung ng let's say standard deviation. Para lang pwede. So anyway, any questions so far? Sir, pag gagawa po ng scatter plot, kailangan po yung age hindi naka-code. Usually kasi for correlation, what we use are numbers. Gumagawa tayo ng scatter plot if the data that we have collected is interval or ratio. Okay? Kasi number by number yon. Yung X mo should be number, your Y mo should be number also. Hindi. Pag scatter plot kasi, ang ano kasi natin dito, ang problema kasi dito sa data natin, isa lang yung ating interval data. Ito lang, yung academic anxiety. All the others are nominal na. Actually, kung gagamit tayo ng correlation dito, dapat ang gamitin natin talaga dito is the chi-square test of association. Kasi ito ay mga nominal data. Okay? So, kung chi-square naman ang gagamitin natin dito, tables. Okay? Then we will be using chi-square test for association. Okay? Your rows will be your academic anxiety. And your columns will be gender. And by default, you can just click in OK. Okay? And then, lalabas na yan. Pearson, degree of freedom, likelihood chi-square, and so on and so forth. Okay? Usually, kapag categorical or nominal yung data mo, we don't produce scatter plots. Kasi very limited lang yung categories. We don't generate scatter plots for nominal. Okay? Any other question? Yan? Okay.